Crimson dawn, ashes of reality. The sun hung low and weak in the sky, a dull red disk, bleeding light over the skeletal remains of what was once a thriving town. Nature had reclaimed most of it. Vines winding around blackened lampposts, trees breaking through the cracked pavement like tombstones. The only sounds were the wind and the crows. 3 cans of soup, half a jar of peanut butter, and a bottle of water. Barely enough for a day, muttered Callan, stuffing the items into a torn satchel. Callan was lean, wiry, hardened by loss and years of surviving in the lichen age. His left eye was covered by a blackened patch, lost in a scrape with a rogue lichen scout. His right eye, sharp as a blade, missed nothing. A former firefighter before the fall, he now moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had pulled too many broken bodies from rubble. "You always complain like we're shopping in a store," said Mira, younger, fierce, her voice marked with sarcasm that barely masked the edge of fear she always carried. She carried a rusting crowbar strapped to her belt, and a small revolver tucked into a holster made from an old bicycle tire. Her past life? A mechanic in a small coastal town. Now, scavenger, fighter, survivor. They moved quietly through the ruins, careful to disturb nothing that might echo or shift. Anything that made noise could lead them to death. "You hear that?" Mira froze. Callan turned. There, half buried behind an overturned fridge, was a metal door, its frame burned but intact. A storm shelter. Or maybe a basement. Callan knelt, brushing ash and dirt away. The door was bolted shut with a rusted padlock. "Could be food. Or bones," he muttered. "Or something worse." Mira glanced at the sky. "We've got maybe an hour of daylight." "Plenty of time," he said, already pulling a lockpick from his boot. The lock clunked open with a soft snap, and the door groaned as they pried it open. Inside, darkness, the scent of dust, and something else, old, ancient. Mira clicked on a small flashlight, the beam piercing the gloom. Stairs descended into a basement where cobwebs hung like drapes. They stepped carefully down. At the far end, under a thick sheet of black cloth, was a casket, ornate, untouched by rot or time. The silver handles were dulled, but unmistakably valuable. "Is that what I think it is?" Mira whispered. Callan nodded. "An elder. But why here?" They didn't have time to answer. A sound echoed in the wind, distant, mournful, and unmistakable. A howl. Callan's face drained of colour. "We have to move, now." They scrambled out of the basement. Mira grabbed a handful of dirt and scattered it behind them. Callan followed, pulling a sealed bag of acidic powder, a homemade mix of bleach, ash and vinegar. He doused their trail from the door to the street. "Cover our scent," he shouted. Mira reached into her coat, pulling out a bottle of wolfbane extract. They sprayed it into the air, a bitter, acrid scent, designed to confuse the lichen's hypersense. Behind them, the sun slipped lower, kissing the horizon. They ran, over rooftops, through alleyways they had memorized, past crumbled walls and the rusting bones of vehicles. As darkness fell, the wind grew colder. They reached a crumbled chapel. The steeple collapsed, but the underground crypt below was intact. Inside the crypt, they ducked into a sealed chamber carved into stone. The entrance was masked by a wall of debris they had carefully disguised. Inside was silent, secure for now. They collapsed onto the cold stone floor, breathing hard. Callan stared at Mira. An elder, asleep in a basement. If the Lycan missed him, maybe there are more. Mira didn't speak. She didn't need to. They both knew. If that elder wakes, it could mean salvation or damnation. Outside, the first full-throated howl of the night shattered the silence, and the hunt began. There is no morning anymore, just a slightly lighter shade of misery. The sky hangs like a bruise, grey, dead, endless. Ash falls like snow, carried on a wind that has forgotten warmth. The cities are bones now, gnawed down by time, by fire, and by them. The Lycan rule what remains. They are not shadows in the dark. They are the dark. They do not hide from the world. They are the world. Once they were monsters whispered about in fearful myths. Now they are the only certainty. They run in packs of hundreds, sometimes thousands, moving with a precision that betrays their primal appearance. Fur soaked in filth, eyes gleaming like dying embers. They are as organized as they are savage. The cities are their playgrounds, the forests, hunting grounds, the highways, blood trails. Nothing escapes them, not for long. The hollow marches, east of the iron fields. A pack moves across a ruined bridge, once a grand structure of steel and stone. Now it's overgrown, cracked, overrun by moss and decay. The Lycans move low and swift, communicating with glances and guttural growls. They smell the air constantly, heads turning in unison. Nothing, not even rats. They've already hunted here. One slows, sniffs again. The air is dead, the scent of fear, long gone. The world is emptying. They move on. In the ash forest, south of the dead coastline, a deer stumbles through the underbrush, emaciated and twitching. It makes its 6 steps before it's torn apart. The pack doesn't even pause. Blood sprays. Flesh is consumed raw. The bones are left steaming in the cold. A cub, a smaller, adolescent Lycan, approaches too late. It whines, but no one shares. This is not a world of mercy, not even for their own. Atop the black cliffs of the north, the ruins of an ancient cathedral stand jagged against the sky like broken teeth. Once a place of worship, now a nest. The stained glass shattered, the altar used as a feeding table. Blood is smeared in patterns across the floor, symbols only the Alpha understands. Inside they gather, hundreds, maybe more, watching, waiting. The Alpha enters. He does not walk. He arrives, like thunder before the storm, larger than the rest, taller than a man, broader than any beast. His fur is midnight black, thick and heavy like armor. His arms ripple with strength that could crush stone. His jaw is marked by an ancient brand, a rune of old power burned into flesh. The Lycans kneel. His throne is forged from iron rails and bone cemented with dried blood. Skulls hang like ornaments, fangs sharpened to points. He takes his place slowly, like a king grown weary of war, yet incapable of anything else. He looks to the horizon, his domain. No emotion, no triumph. This is how it has always meant to be. The world is his, and yet he lifts his massive snout, sniffs once. Ash, rot, the bitter stench of the earth. Nothing worth his notice. He leans back, growling low, almost bored. Not out of complacency, but because he knows nothing escapes, nothing lasts. Below, across the forgotten world, small pockets of life remain, but they do not shine. They flicker, dim and terrified, like dying embers beneath the storm. The elders, the last of the vampires, cling to the ruins beneath ruins, their minds fractured, their bodies thinned. They feed on rats, on bloodless corpses, on dreams, a shadow of what they were. The humans fare no better, scavengers, vagabonds, hiding like insects. The ones who survive do so because they've learned how to leave no scent, how to never scream, how to vanish. The lichen don't hunt for sport, they hunt for silence, and silence now covers the world like a grave. Far below, in the hollow crypt where Callan and Mira rest, the night passes without incident. No sniffing at the stone door, no claws against rock, no howls, only silence. Cold, suffocating silence, but not safety, because the lichen own this world. And one day, even the smallest mistake will be their last. The sun had risen, but barely. Its light was no longer golden. It hung low and dull, like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the ruins. A breeze carried dust and silence across the bones of the town. And Mira moved alone. She hadn't woken Callan. She couldn't explain it, not to him, not even to herself. But the casket, it had pulled at her, like something calling from the dark, with her crowbar strapped to her side, revolver tucked tight, and a worn canvas satchel slung across her back. She slipped through the broken chapel, moving past the fallen stones and down into the crypt's narrow exit tunnel. Her boots made barely a sound on the dirt path as she crossed the Valley of Ash. The town stood ahead, quiet and skeletal beneath the grey sky. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back. She stepped carefully over a burned car chassis and paused, kneeling low. Tracks, clawed, heavy, fresh. Large impressions pressed deep into the soot-covered soil. At least 5, maybe 6. A lichen hunting party had passed this way in the night. She scanned the buildings. No movement, no sounds, no shadows shifting between stone and ruin. Still, she moved faster. The ruined building loomed ahead. The fridge still lay on its side. She rounded it and froze. The metal door was sealed, tight, clean, shut. Her stomach twisted. They left it open. She dropped her satchel and yanked out her crowbar, jamming it into the seam, teeth gritted. She pulled with all her weight. Nothing. She climbed, scrambling up the cracked wall beside it, shards of old brick biting into her fingers. From the top, she looked for another entrance, another way in. Her foot slipped. The world tilted, and then blackness. She awoke in darkness, dirt, dust, cold stone beneath her. The basement. She sat up slowly, dizzy, pain radiating from the back of her skull. Her fingers touched her scalp. Wet, sticky, blood. "Damn it," she whispered. She hadn't masked her scent. They'd smell the blood, track it, hunt it. Above, she heard movement, low, shifting. Clawed feet against broken glass, snuffling, growling. The lichen were here. They had the scent, but they weren't trying to get in. She stared at the sealed door from the inside. No rattling, no pounding, just the fevered scrape of claws circling above, searching, sniffing, roaming. They wanted her, and yet they didn't breach the door. Why? She uncorked the small bottle of vinegar and ash, the burn mix. Hands shaking, she poured it over her scalp wound. The pain was instant and white hot, like her skin was peeling away. She bit down on her fist to stifle the scream. Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her back to the wall, staring into the dark, facing the door, weapon clutched tight, breath shallow. And time passed, hours maybe, the sounds of the lichen never far. Sometimes they moved closer, sometimes farther, but never inside. It made no sense. Why weren't they entering? Then it hit her. The chapel. She hadn't masked her tracks when she left. They could follow her scent back to Callan. No, she whispered, horrified. Outside, the sky began to pale. The whispers of twilight retreated. The hunt was ending. As the first weak light broke through the cracked bricks above, the silence returned. Mira stood slowly, limping slightly, and stepped to the iron door. She pulled. It creaked, squealed, then gave way. Fresh air, dim light, freedom. But before she could step out, a sound behind her, the coffin, a groan of old wood, a shift of weight. The lid moved. Her blood ran cold. She didn't look back. She ran, up and out of the ruin, into the cold morning light. Her legs pounded against cracked stone and ash. Her breath came in panicked gasps. She didn't stop, not until the chapel rose into view, silent, still intact. But even as she descended into the crypt, one thought followed her like a shadow, clinging to her heels. What woke the coffin? And why did the lichen refuse to enter? The chapel came into view, broken, the entrance smashed inward, stones scattered like bones, the hidden seal torn apart. No, Mira whispered. Her walk turned to a sprint, boots pounding over dirt and debris. She stumbled over a torn backpack, slid down the ruined stairwell, and landed hard at the bottom. Her scream echoed in the crypt. Callan! Blood. Everywhere. Smeared across the stone walls, pooling beneath broken supplies, trailing like a story told in red. There were claw marks, deep ones, the kind only made in panic, in pain. The fight had been brutal. Mira dropped to her knees, shaking. Her eyes caught something near the wall. Callan's eye patch, torn, bloodied, left behind like an accusation. She picked it up with trembling hands. No. Her voice cracked as the weight crushed her chest. I didn't cover the trail. I led them here. Her body shook as she collapsed against the wall, sobbing. The only person she trusted in this cursed world. Gone. Because of her. She wept so hard she didn't hear the footsteps. Not until it was too late. A voice, old and smooth like decaying velvet, broke the silence. Come now. What could possibly be so dreadful, my dear? She whirled, pulling her revolver, but stopped short. He stood at the edge of the crypt, an elder, tall, impossibly thin, draped in a long coat that had once been noble. His skin was grey, almost translucent, stretched thin over bones. His hair was white, stringy, like cobwebs clinging to a ruined chandelier. His eyes sunken, but bright with old unfathomable knowledge, locked onto hers. Get back! Mira barked, raising her weapon. Are you an elder? How did you get here in the daylight? He smiled, revealing yellowed fangs. There are always shadows, my dear, he said gently, even in the brightest of lights. Have you come to kill me? He laughed, dry and hollow. Oh, no, nothing so crude. I've come to save you. Her grip didn't loosen. You see, he continued, long ago, I delved deeper into the shadows than most of my kind. I found something there. away to cast shadows so deep, even the lichen refused to enter them. Mira's eyes narrowed. Is that why they didn't go into the basement? Why they didn't attack you? He gave a slight bow. Yes, most of them can't bear it. My kind of darkness unsettles them, confuses them. That said, the larger ones, the true alphas, they are not so easily fooled. He took a step forward. Mira raised the revolver again. Oh, come now, he sighed. Let's not pretend I pose a threat to you in my current state. I'm famished. His lips curled upward again. Would it be too much to ask for a bit of sustenance? Mira backed away. You're not feeding on me. He sighed again, theatrically, and pulled a small glass bottle from his coat. It sloshed with murky red liquid. I brought this. It's what they use to give out at blood banks to help recovery after donating. You'll be fine. Single cut, perhaps a sip or two. She didn't speak. Let's look at it like this, he said softly, almost charming now. I'll keep you hidden, safe. I'll keep the lichen from tearing your throat out in the night. All I ask is a donation. She looked at the bloodied room, Callan's patch, her tears still wet on her face. She rolled up her sleeve. One cut, she said through clenched teeth. The elder's face split into a grin, so wide it barely looked human. Lovely. He stepped forward, took her wrist gently, and bit, delicately, like sipping from a wineglass. Mira winced, breathing hard, watching his face twitch with ecstasy. After just a moment, he pulled back. He looked different, taller, eyes clearer, his spine straighter. Ah, he whispered. That feels divine. He reached into his coat and produced a silk cloth, dabbing at his lips. My name, he said, is Veyron. Mira clutched her arm, still glaring. I propose an alliance, he continued, between you and I, and perhaps others, should we find any. I offer protection. My shadows will keep the beasts at bay. In return, all I ask is, well, you know by now. Mira looked at him, then at the ruined chamber where Callan had fought and bled. Her face hardened. Deal. Veyron's grin returned. This is the start of a beautiful friendship. I can feel it. He turned towards the crypt stairs, his long coat flowing like smoke behind him. But first, he said, may I suggest we return to my basement? It is far safer than this slaughterhouse. I've already taken the liberty of fetching supplies, food, water, even candles. One mustn't sulk in the dark without atmosphere. Mira stared at the blood-stained wall for a long moment, then turned. I have nothing left here. Then she followed him into the shadows. The basement was dimly lit and silent, save for the soft crackle of a candle flame. Shadows clung to the stone like old regrets. Mira sat on a torn blanket near a small pile of supplies. Tins of food, bottled water, a wrapped loaf of mould-dusted bread. The air was thick with dampness and dust. But for once, not fear. Across from her, reclined in a salvaged velvet armchair, sat Veyron, his ancient form still skeletal, but more composed. His skin had drawn tighter to his bones since feeding, and his eyes, once sunken hollows, now gleamed with a dim, dangerous light. Mira took a slow sip of water, the silence stretching between them like a rope too worn to snap. Then she asked it, the question she'd wanted to ask since the beginning. How did all this happen? Veyron's smile was soft, almost nostalgic. He steepled his long fingers, leaning forward as if preparing to recite a bedtime story no one should ever hear. "Ah," he said, "the fall, the beginning of the end." He gazed into the candlelight, voice lowering. It started with one, a single lichen, not a mindless beast, but something worse, something cursed. Its blood was black, its hunger insatiable, not born, but created. A plague in fur and fang. Mira's expression tightened. Where did it come from? It was imprisoned, Veyron said, kept buried in a vault, deep beneath the old woods beyond the black cliffs, bound by more than stone or chains, bound by blood. You see, there was once a family, the Grahams, a mortal bloodline older than some elders. Their purpose, their very identity, was to guard the beast, to ensure it never walked the earth again. Mira blinked. A human family guarded a cursed lichen. They were no ordinary family, Veyron said, voice reverent. The Grahams were chosen by Lysanor himself, the god of lichens. Not all lichens worship him now, but once his name commanded fear. He knew the cursed one was too dangerous, even for his own kind, so he passed judgment. He selected a bloodline of mortals, bound them by oath and spirit. They were to guard the beast forever, ensure it never walked free. They were humanity's blade held at the throat of a god's mistake. So what went wrong? Mira asked. Veyron's smile vanished. Something always does. Maybe it was betrayal, maybe desperation, or perhaps the curse itself grew restless and whispered to one of them. Either way, it broke free. He looked her dead in the eye, and when it did, the world burned. Veyron leaned back, his voice turning brittle with old sorrow. The curse spread faster than anyone imagined. The elders tried to fight, the humans tried to flee, but nothing worked. Even our oldest, those who had stood against plagues, fires, wars, they were torn apart. Our powers were useless. We were, how do the humans say it? Paper to their scissors. Mira tilted her head. And no rock. Veyron actually chuckled, though the sound was bone dry. Exactly, my dear. There should have been a rock in that little game. Something to stop them. But it never came. And now? They rule. They don't just hunt, they conquer. And as they conquered, their numbers grew. One curse became a legion. A swarm of monsters birthed in blood and bound by nothing. Mira leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You said the Alpha, the one on the throne now, can see through your shadows. Yes, Veyron said, his expression darkening. But the beast on the throne now is not the one who began this. What happened to the original? He was challenged. That is the way of the lichens. When one believes they're strong enough to lead, they challenge the Alpha in blood. They fight. Only one survives. And so, the cursed one who began it all eventually fell. And the one now? Veyron's face was grave. He is powerful. Perhaps the most powerful of them all. I have not seen him, but I have felt him. His presence is like a storm pressed against your skin. He does not need to hunt. His power draws the others like gravity. Myra went quiet, then finally asked, "Will we survive this?" Veyron was silent for a long time. Then, with a small, tragic smile, he answered, "Probably not." Myra's heart twisted, but then he leaned forward. "But we will try, because sometimes even a dying breath can carry a spark." He looked up, thoughtful. "There is something missing in this world. Something that should be here. A presence, a soul, a flame." "Someone?" Mira asked. "Maybe," he whispered. "Maybe not." She waited. Then he added, "There is a prophecy." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You're joking." "I wish I were," he said. "It's one of those old elder stories, told when fledglings needed hope or fear. It says, when the elders are at their darkest hour, when the shadows are too thin to hide them, one of their kind will rise, a being with a gift untouched by age or war, a soul of fire, and shadows so deep, even the cursed will tremble." Mira stared at him. He shrugged. "Bit dramatic, but we were always a theatrical bunch." "Sounds like nonsense." "Maybe it is, but if this isn't the darkest hour, then what is?" He raised his glass of water like a toast. "Let's hope the prophecy's fashionably late and not long forgotten." There is no ceremony. There is no crown. Only the throne and the right to sit upon it. The lichen throne is not carved by hands nor built by kings. It is shaped by conquest. A jagged, towering seat of fused bone, rusted steel, and charred stone, it rests deep in the heart of the old cathedral, now called the Howlspire. Sunlight never reaches it. The wind avoids its doors. The throne remembers every death it was built upon. And seated upon it now is power incarnate. The lichens do not speak his name. They call him the one who remains. Because no matter how many have risen, only he still sits. Long ago, the first fall. The first alpha fell to treachery, not by claws but betrayal. The second was stronger, but foolish. The third held the throne for years, until the fourth tore out his throat under a blood-red moon. There have been many. The throne was not sacred. It was a challenge, an invitation to violence, a test of dominance. To sit was to be hunted. To rise meant spilling blood. To rule meant becoming something more than beast. And then he came. No one knew from where. No bloodline, no legends. Just presence. When he challenged the Alpha at the time, an enormous brute named Korag, none believed he'd win. Korag was brutal, cunning, unstoppable in the field. The fight lasted seconds. The challenger didn't roar, didn't boast. He moved. A blur of black fur and white eyes, he struck like lightning, tearing through Korag's chest with one massive claw, lifting him into the air like a child's toy. When the body hit the ground, silence fell across the Howlspire. He did not speak. He simply sat, and none have dared remove him since. Not long ago, another challenger. There was a lichen named Vasruk, powerful and proud. He had torn through dozens in the southern hunting packs, amassing followers, howling his name into the bones of fallen cities. He believed the throne was waiting for him, that he was chosen. He entered the cathedral before dusk, his fur slick with the blood of his own pack, killed to prove his dominance. The one who remains did not rise, he simply watched. Busrook charged. The air split with motion. In a blink, the Alpha moved through him, not around, through. Busrook dropped to the stone, his head rolling in another direction. His body hit the ground in silence. The pack watching did not howl. They knelt, not from fear, but because they knew this was not a lichen. This was something beyond. He sits still now, motionless on his throne of death. His fur is black as void, not fur but shadow, writhing like smoke in moonlight. His eyes are not eyes, just pale silver discs glowing from within. The runes of fallen elders are scarred across his chest, a message written in wounds. We tried. His claws are longer than blades. His breath steams in the cold, even when the wind does not blow. No lichen speaks near him. No vampire dares approach his territory. Even the wind dies around his throne. He does not eat. He does not sleep. He simply waits, because one day something will challenge him again. And when it does, he will rise and end it, just like the rest. The candle's flame flickered, though there was no wind. Mara and Veyron sat in silence, she sharpening her blade against the stone, he nursing a cup of dark liquid that wasn't quite wine. The basement had grown quiet since their last conversation, but something about the stillness now felt heavier. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Running. Boots on broken stone. Gasps. A distant shout. The sound of something far larger behind them. Snarling. Mira stood instantly. What was that? Veyron didn't move. His long fingers curled around the stem of his cup. His eyes stared forward, unfocused. Footsteps, he murmured. 2, no 3. 2 human, 1 not. Mira's heart pounded. Someone's out there. Veyron looked at her, amused. Do not panic, my dear. They cannot find us here. We are hidden. She frowned. I found you. He smiled, fanged and sly. I allowed it. Oh, Mira said, eyes narrowing. Right. Veyron closed his eyes briefly, his face still. Then he spoke with eerie calm. A man and a woman, fleeing. The lichen are not far behind. They will not last long. Mira stepped towards the exit. Can we help them? Veyron raised an eyebrow. I don't think that's wise. Why not? Why are they running through ruins this close to lichen territory? Are they careless? Desperate? Bait? He paused. Or worse, killers themselves. Mira clenched her fists. Look, there aren't many of us left. If we don't help each other, we're already dead. Veyron tilted his head. You mortals and your noble impulses. Very well. He stood with a creak of joints. But you'll have to reach them. One look at me, and they'll flee just as fast. Fair enough, Mira said, already grabbing her coat. The outside world was just as broken as before. Ash drifted from the sky. The sun, barely visible through the clouds, painted the buildings in crimson tones. Mira darted from cover to cover, boots crunching over debris, the air tense with scent and sound. Then she saw them, a man and a woman, barely adults, mud-streaked faces, torn clothes, eyes wide with terror. They sprinted between the remains of a collapsed market, shouting as something massive tore through the ruins behind them. A lichen hunting party, 4 of them, moving like shadows with muscle, teeth bared, snarling, hungry. Mira stepped out from the alley. Hey, Over here. The two humans saw her and changed direction instantly. Help us! The woman screamed. The lichen turned toward all three. They howled in unison. The hunt was on. Mira ran. Veyron! She shouted as she neared the ruined chapel. Now would be a great time to cheat death. The two humans stumbled after her, panic in every movement. One tripped, but Mira yanked him up. The lichens were almost on them. One leapt, snarling, claws outstretched. And then the shadows moved. They didn't spread. They lashed. Like tendrils of ink, blackness surged from the chapel's base, crawling like smoke across the ground, and then rising like a wall between predator and prey. The lichens skidded to a halt, snarled. One pawed at the barrier, but didn't cross. The air rippled. The shadows whispered. They remembered this scent. They remembered him. Mira led the two strangers inside, pulling them down into the crypt, just as the shadows sealed the entrance behind them, like a curtain falling on a stage. They collapsed inside, gasping, coughing, still shaking. Veyron stood calmly in the centre of the room, as if he hadn't just repelled death itself. His smile was cold. "Welcome," he said. "You're safe. For now." The moment they crossed the threshold into the crypt, the two strangers screamed. The man scrambled back, knocking over a supply crate, while the woman pulled a rusted blade from her coat with shaking hands. "An elder," the man shouted. "He'll kill us." The woman added, wild-eyed, "They drink blood. He's going to feed." Veyron blinked, almost offended. Mira stepped between them and the vampire, arms wide. Hey, calm down. If he wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding." The woman hesitated, lowering the blade slightly, but still tense. The man looked between Mira and Veyron, sweat running down his dirt-smeared face. "Why would an elder help us?" "Because I told him to," Mira said. There was a beat of silence. Then Veyron sighed theatrically. "Technically, I agreed to help. It was more of a reluctant compromise than obedience." The woman's breathing slowed. She tucked the blade away, hesitantly. "We're sorry. It's just... we've seen what your kind can do." "We all have," Mira said gently. "But right now, he's the only reason you're not dead." They nodded, slowly. "Names?" Mira asked. The man cleared his throat. "I'm Jonas." "Kayla," the woman said. We were with a larger group, about 9 of us, camped out near the riverbed. We had a watch, walls, everything." Mira's stomach turned. "Let me guess. The lichens found you." Kayla's voice broke slightly. "They didn't just find us. They slaughtered everyone, ripped through like they were nothing. We ran. We jumped into the lake, tried to throw them off." Jonas added, "Didn't work. They found our scent again. We've been running ever since." Veyron leaned forward from his chair, his voice low and dry. "That is the problem with your kind. You cluster." They both looked at him. In the old world, travelling in numbers offered strength, community, protection. He tapped a clawed finger against his temple. Today, it's little more than a stronger smell. The lichens don't hunt by sight. They hunt by scent. And the bigger the group, the louder the blood sings. Jonas muttered, "That's grim." Veyron smiled. "It's reality, dear boy. We elders prefer solitude. Even before the fall, it's cleaner, quieter. easier to survive. Mira gave them a moment, then spoke. "You're safe now, but we need to be clear. There's a cost to staying here." Jonas and Kayla looked at her, then at Veyron. Veyron stood, his form cast in long, writhing shadows on the crypt walls. "I mask your scent. That is not a trick. It is power. Power that requires replenishment." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "You mean blood?" Veyron said simply. "Yours. Not all of it, of course. A donation. A slice of your energy to keep the wolves at bay." Jonas shook his head. "You want us to feed you?" Veyron smirked. "I want to keep you alive. A drop or two is a small price for not being turned into mulch." Kayla looked at Mira. "It's the only way," Mira said. "I've done it. He doesn't take much, just enough to do whatever it is he does." They stood silent. Then Jonas exhaled. "If it keeps us breathing, so be it." Kayla nodded slowly. "Yeah, we'll do it." Veyron clapped his hands once lightly. "Wonderful. What a delightful little gathering we've become." He turned back toward the corridor. "Quite the party we're having," he muttered. "If we allow any more guests, I may need to consider relocation. A crypt with better lighting and a slightly less blood-soaked ambience." Mira cracked the faintest smile. "You're not funny." "Humour is subjective," Veyron replied. Outside, in the ruins beneath the ash-choked sky, a shadow moved. Not cast by light, not shaped by flame, alive. It slithered along a collapsed stone wall, rippled across the surface like oil on water, and then stepped free. The shadow took form, an elder, tall, wrapped in flowing black cloth, her eyes glinting faintly beneath a bone-white hood. Her lips curled into a smirk as she gazed towards the hidden crypt. "Veyron, you sneaky corpse!" Her voice was like smoke soaked in silk. "You've got your own little pantry now. 3 delicious humans. Fresh, willing. Lucky you." Below ground. Veyron paused mid-sentence. His eyes flicked towards the stairs. "Wait." His tone changed. "Someone is out there." Mira tensed instantly. Kayla gripped her blade again. Jonas moved beside the supplies, ready to grab a pipe. "Another elder," Veyron said, voice low. "I can feel them. Barely. I can't quite sense who. That's rare." He turned, stepping toward the wall, shadows twitching at his heels. Then silence. "Gone," he whispered. "They didn't stay long, but they felt me. They were close, too close. And then they vanished." He turned back to the group. "We must be careful. Some of my kind are not like me." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You mean charming and cryptic?" "I mean ruthless and hungry. Some elders survived because they were smart. Others because they were monsters. And if this one is still alive, they're powerful. Very." He looked toward the shadows thoughtfully. "They didn't stay long enough for me to know who—" "And you never will." The voice came from behind him, smooth, dark, familiar. Veyron spun, fangs bared, shadows rising from his hands like claws. The 3 humans backed against the far wall, ready to fight or die trying. But Veyron's stance slowly relaxed. His expression shifted, and then he smiled. "I should have known," he said softly. "There's only one I could never sense." From the darkest corner of the crypt, a shape emerged. A woman, tall, ageless, her skin pale like moonlight, her eyes sharp as daggers. She wore black robes layered with subtle silver lining, and her presence was regal without effort. There was elegance in her movements and something behind her eyes that Mira couldn't read. Power, ancient and controlled. "You'll never sense me, dear brother," she said with a faint smirk. Mira's eyes widened. Kayla gasped. Jonas blinked. "Wait, your sister?" Mira asked. Veyron gave a slight nod. "Yes, I believed her dead. It's been over a century." The woman gave a short bow. "Not quite. I, too, learned the art of masking, though I must say, your little sanctuary was almost charming enough to keep me away. Almost." "Oh, forgive my manners," Veyron said, straightening his coat and gesturing dramatically. "This is Ilaria, my sister, and until 10 seconds ago, presumed deceased." Mira and the others bowed, cautiously. Ilaria gave a polite nod. "Don't bow too low. I'm not royalty, just very good at staying alive." Veyron sighed, gesturing around them. "Well, quite the little gathering we've become. Humans, prophecy, ancient siblings reuniting over blood and ash. We're practically a family." He glanced at the walls. "This crypt's getting cramped." Ilaria smiled. "I thought you might say that." She stepped forward, folding her hands calmly. "I know just the place." The fire burned low in the crypt, barely more than a flicker struggling in the stale air. Outside, ash fell like snow through the crumbled ruins. The world slept in silence, if only because nothing living dared make a sound. Below, in the hush of shadow and stone, Ilaria and Veyron sat across from one another, their features calm, but their eyes old and worn. They hadn't spoken in an hour. When Ilaria finally broke the silence, her voice was like wind through cracked glass. "Do you know how many of our kind are still alive?" Veyron stared into the flame, its light dancing along his pale face. He didn't answer immediately. "Too few," he said at last, "and most of the powerful are gone." Ilaria nodded slowly. "I've crossed 3 continents. I've walked through the bones of cities. I've seen nothing but scavengers. Some of them feral, most broken. They drink what they can, from whoever they can, and move on. They've lost what made us. Us." She folded her hands in her lap. "They cannot be trusted." Veyron exhaled through his nose. "I agree." She studied his face for a long moment. "Can you sense them?" He looked up. "I can," he said carefully. "Faint echoes. A flicker here, a scent there, but I dare not reach out. I don't know who they are, not anymore. Some of our bloodline aren't intelligent enough to understand restraint." Ilaria raised an eyebrow. "They would kill the humans?" she asked. "Kill, feed, move on." He nodded. "They wouldn't see Kayla, Jonas, or Mira as potential, only as prey." The shadows in the room seemed to stretch as he spoke. "I can sense them, yes," Veyron continued, "but I won't probe, not deeply, not with intent. If I do, They'll sense me, and some of them may come looking. Ilaria's face hardened. And you're not ready for that. Veyron gave a faint, dry smile. None of us are. A moment passed between them, heavy with memory. Then he said, softly, Tell me, sister, do you still believe in the prophecy? She didn't answer at first. Her gaze dropped to the stone floor, then rose again, filled with something old and bitter. That was a story, she said, told to fledglings to make them feel safe when the dark closed in. Veyron's eyes glinted. You used to believe it. I used to believe a lot of things, she replied, that our kind would endure, that the blood would always guide us, that no matter what horrors emerged from the dark, we would adapt, survive, rule. She looked at him now directly. There was no softness in her expression. We are doomed, Veyron. This world is no longer ours. The throne belongs to monsters, and we are shadows, fading into myth. Veyron nodded slowly. Maybe, he said, but even a fading shadow can still hide a fire. Ilaria didn't reply, but for the first time since she arrived, she looked uncertain. Mira leaned against the cold stone wall, arms crossed, watching the candle burn low. Across from her, Ilaria stood tall, elegant, even in stillness, her long cloak draped like smoke. She studied Mira with those ancient, piercing eyes, half curious, half calculating. You said you knew of another place, Mira asked, breaking the silence. Somewhere safe? Ilaria smiled faintly. Safer, dear. There is no such thing as safe anymore. Mira frowned. Fair. I passed it months ago, Ilaria continued. An old farmhouse, miles from anything, falling apart, rotting in the wind, but beneath it, hidden under the boards and the bones, was a bunker, reinforced, locked. Someone's laboratory, perhaps, or a fallout shelter from another era. She tilted her head. I didn't investigate fully, but it reeked of forgotten purpose. Mira was quiet for a moment, processing. Ilaria stepped closer, her tone softening. So tell me, dear, how did you survive all this? Mira gave a hollow laugh. I don't know. One day at a time, I guess. Just moving, eating, hiding, trying not to scream when it got too quiet. Ilaria's gaze deepened. How about your family? Mira's voice dipped, more guarded now. My mum, she passed before all this. She had Alzheimer's. Wasn't really there by the end. She swallowed. My dad, he was brilliant, a scientist, spoke in formulas more than words. But when she died, something broke in him. He stopped talking, stopped trying. He just faded. I'm sorry, Ilaria said quietly. Mira shrugged, like it hurt less if she pretended it didn't matter. It was a long time ago. I've been on my own since the world started falling apart. Ilaria stepped closer, lowering her voice. Hope is the only thing that keeps us going, even when we don't realize it's there. You've survived this long not because of luck, but because something inside you refuses to break. Mira looked down. I'm no one, just getting through. Ilaria leaned in slightly, voice silk and shadow. I sense something in you, something powerful. Maybe not yet, but it's there. Flickering. Mira met her gaze, unsure how to respond. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed from the tunnel beyond. Kayla's voice called out. Sun's coming up. If we're going to get supplies, Now's the time. Jonas appeared behind her, checking his gear. We're low on water and food. Again. Mira pushed off the wall, shaking the weight of the conversation from her shoulders. Then let's move. Ilaria watched her go, silent. Veyron appeared in the doorway behind them, arms crossed. Quite the little army we're assembling, he said dryly. Ilaria didn't look at him. She's stronger than she knows. Veyron smirked. They always are, until the world shows them why. The sun hung low in the sky, bleeding orange through the ash haze. What little warmth it gave was devoured by the cold silence of the ruins. Myra, Kayla, and Jonas moved quietly through the skeleton of a once thriving district. Abandoned homes, burned out storefronts, rusted cars blanketed in dust. The city was dead, and its corpse offered no comfort. They searched everything. Every alley, every collapsed building, every dark crevice that might once have held food, water, fuel, hope. Nothing. Empty shelves, smashed tins, rot and bones. The day dragged on and the silence became heavier. By the time the sky began to fade into that sickly purple dusk, Mira sat down hard on a stone block, staring at the crumbled husk of a convenience store. There's nothing left, she muttered. Jonas kicked a broken sign aside, shaking his head. This place is useless. We're scraping bones and hoping for miracles. We need to move on. Yeah, Kayla agreed, adjusting her torn jacket. We can't live like this. If we don't move soon, we're going to end up just like the last group. Mira wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her mind drifted for a moment, then remembered Ilaria's words. There's a place, she said quietly. They looked at her. Mira stood, brushing the dust off her pants. Ilaria told me about an old farmhouse. It's far isolated, but under it there's a bunker. Reinforced, secure, hidden. Kayla's eyes widened, hopeful. That would be amazing. Something off-grid, away from all this. Jonas frowned. Ilaria, he said carefully. One of the elders. Mira nodded. Yes. He looked between her and Kayla. And you trust them? Her? Veyron, you really think they care about us? He gestured around them. Because a few years ago, they'd be feeding on us without second thought. Mira didn't flinch. She stepped toward him, calm but firm. They're not who they were, or maybe they are, but they've changed, just like we've changed, just like this world has. Jonas started to speak, but she cut him off. They saved us when the lichens were at our backs, when we were bleeding, hopeless, hunted. They stood between us and death. They didn't need to, but they did. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. They helped us survive. They kept us alive. They gave us time to breathe. And right now, that's more than anyone else in this world has given. Jonas lowered his gaze, silent. Myra looked between the two of them. Her tone softened. I don't know what's next, but I know this. We don't make it without them, and for the first time in a long time, I actually believe we can make it. Kayla stared at her, impressed. Even Jonas didn't argue. Something in Mira had shifted. She didn't look like the girl just trying to get through the day anymore. She looked like someone willing to lead, even if just for a moment something flickered behind her eyes. Not just survival. Not just anger, something like fire, a purpose beginning to burn. sun was falling fast now, bleeding orange into the ash-grey sky. Mira, Kayla, and Jonas were moving quickly, heading back toward the chapel crypt before the last light was gone. They'd scavenged nothing, the day nearly wasted, until Jonas spotted something jutting out of the tree line to the east. Fencing, barbed wire, metal gates. A crumbling sign, mostly rust. US Military Research Facility. Biohazard authorized personnel only. "What the hell?" Kayla murmured. Jonas shrugged. "Guess we're not the first ones to come this way." The gates were hanging off their hinges, the road cracked and overgrown. Nature had started reclaiming the complex, but not fast enough to erase what had happened there. Inside, they found the ruins of a once high-security structure, broken walls, collapsed ceilings, equipment ripped apart or rusted through, computer terminals smashed, glass cases shattered. It looked like someone, or something, wanted this place erased. "Whatever this was, it's gone now," Jonas muttered, kicking aside a melted keypad. They moved through what was once a sterilized hallway, past rows of shattered lab rooms, until Mira stopped suddenly. "Wait," she whispered. She pointed to a wide cylindrical tank, its thick glass smashed inward, shards glittering on the floor. The metallic base hummed faintly, barely alive, as if it still remembered power. It was large enough to hold a human. "Something was in here," Mira said softly. "Something unfinished." Kayla stepped closer, her face pale. "Do you think this is where they were working on a cure?" Mira looked at the shredded remains of lab coats on the ground, blood dried on shattered instruments, burn marks on the wall. "Maybe, but whatever it was, it didn't end well." They searched the room carefully, but most of it was useless. Burned, torn, stripped, until Jonas called out, "Here!" In a broken filing cabinet, beneath a scorched binder, they found the remains of a black folder. The pages were mostly missing or torn, the few that remained fragile with time and moisture, but one sheet stood out, partially intact, scrawled with notes and diagrams. At the top, faded but visible, Project Lichen Cure, Phase 2A. Subject viability, virus-based transmission reversal, recombinant antibody stability, incomplete. Pages missing. Further development halted due to breach. Mira's hand trembled slightly as she turned the page, but the rest was gone. "Let's take this," Jonas said quietly. "Whatever it is, it's something." They returned just as the sun vanished. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the first howls echoed from far-off hills. The crypt doors closed behind them with a heavy finality. Veyron and Ilaria were already waiting, seated like statues beneath flickering candlelight. The shadows seemed to stir behind them as Mira stepped forward and handed Veyron the tattered file. "We found this," she said, "at an old military facility. Nothing left but dust and rubble, but this was buried in the wreckage." Veyron opened the folder, eyes flicking across the contents. Ilaria stepped beside him, silent, scanning the few legible words. "A cure," Veyron whispered. Ilaria raised an eyebrow. "Or an attempt." Kayla spoke up. "We think they were close, but something happened. The tank. There was blood, like whatever they were experimenting on either escaped or was destroyed." "Either way," Jonas added. They stopped just before they finished. Veyron closed the file slowly. This confirms what many of us whispered, that humans were trying to reverse the curse, not through magic, through science. Ilaria nodded, thoughtfully. It makes sense. Your kind always seeks to understand what it cannot control, but it must have failed, Mira said. There's no sign of success, just ruins. Veyron leaned back, expression unreadable. Or perhaps, he said slowly, someone didn't want it to succeed. A heavy silence followed. Do you believe it's real? Kayla asked. That it could have worked. Ilaria's voice was calm, measured. Hope is a dangerous thing. But yes, if they had time, knowledge, and the right blood, it could have been real. Mira looked at the file, then back at them. Do you think there's a way to continue it? Veyron glanced at her. A faint glimmer of curiosity sparked in his eyes. Perhaps. But if there is, it will be deep beneath the ashes, and well guarded. Ilaria placed a hand on Mira's shoulder. Then we find this farmhouse, and we begin again. The crypt was tense with motion, bags packed, weapons checked, supplies rationed, and above them the world was slipping into twilight once more. Mira stood near the edge of the makeshift table, double-checking what little gear they had. She looked toward Ilaria, who stood calmly beside a lantern, arms folded in thought. How far is this farmhouse, really? Mira asked. Ilaria tilted her head. If we had a car, perhaps a month's drive. Jonah, sitting nearby with Kayla, scoffed. There are no cars, no fuel. Half the roads are collapsed. Walking could take years, if the lichens don't kill us first. Then it can't be done, Kayla muttered. Veyron, ever the silent listener, stepped out from the far side of the room. A smile crept across his pale face. Who said anything about walking? They all turned to him. We can get you there. In moments. Jonas frowned. What? Veyron stepped closer, the candlelight dancing in his eyes. You see, we travel by shadow, from one to the next, across great distances, as long as there is darkness to move through. At night, we can move faster than the eye can follow. It's how I've crossed continents, for we are not bound to earth or road. We are shadow. Kayla blinked. So, we can all go? Veyron shook his head. No, not all at once. We can carry one each with us. It is demanding. Takes a toll. The shadow bends around us, and we must protect you within it. Only 2 of you may go. One must stay behind. A hush settled over the room. And once we've arrived, Ilaria added, we will need to secure the place and re-energize ourselves. The journey will drain much of our power. You mean feed? Mira said bluntly. How much? Ilaria's expression didn't change. Too much. We will need rest before we return for the 3rd. I'll stay, Mira said without hesitation. Kayla turned to her. Are you sure? Mira nodded. I trust them. But if something goes wrong, we can't all disappear at once. Veyron's voice turned grim. We'll travel at night, which means they will be out. Lichens roam most freely in the dark, and once we're gone, this place will have no protection. I know, Mira replied, but I've been thinking about that. She turned, stepping toward a small metal case she'd been keeping near her supplies. I've been scavenging more than just food. I found some old survival gear, cleaning chemicals, even a few science kits from what used to be a school. She pulled out a few small bottles, clear liquid, dark brown vials, a cracked measuring spoon. "I think I can mask my scent." Veyron raised an eyebrow. "How?" Mira smiled. "Ammonia, vinegar, sulphur. It's not perfect, but layered right and kept fresh. It might confuse the lichens' noses. Their sense of smell is so refined they can pick us out by emotion, but if I can throw off the chemical markers, they might not track me. At least, not easily." Kayla stared at her. "Where did you learn that?" Mira gave a small shrug. "My dad. He was a scientist, remember? He taught me more than I thought I remembered. It just took a while to come back." Even Veyron looked momentarily impressed. "A clever trick," he said, "and desperate enough to work." Ilaria studied her with a rare flicker of admiration. "You're shining, Mira. I see it now." Mira looked down at her small collection of bottles, her breath steady, her eyes burning with purpose. "I'm tired of just surviving," she said. "I want to start fighting back." Night had fully fallen. In silence deeper than death, Ilaria and Veyron stood on opposite ends of the crypt, each with one hand placed gently on their chosen human, Kayla. Jonas, the shadows curled around their feet, rippling like ink across water. "Whatever happens," Veyron said softly, "don't resist, and don't open your eyes." Kayla inhaled sharply. "What if I—" But they were already gone. The crypt fell still, and the darkness moved. The journey, the world vanished. No air, no sound, no light, only motion. Jonas felt like he was falling and standing still at the same time. Kayla clutched at nothing as cold needles of wind tore past her skin and vanished into vapor. They didn't breathe. They didn't need to. Time wasn't passing, not normally. They weren't walking or running. They were slipping. Across rooftops, under streets, through cracks in stone and shattered buildings, shadow to shadow, like whispers following a dying sun. The farmhouse. When their feet found earth again, it was frozen. A field of snow stretched in all directions, quiet and endless. At the centre stood a crumbling farmhouse, its roof partially caved in, windows broken, walls weather-beaten and greyed with time. The elders were panting. Ilaria stumbled forward, blinking slowly. Her form wavered, then vanished into the house without a word. "Ilaria," Kayla called, but Veyron raised a hand. Moments later, the front door creaked open, and a thin, hidden panel inside slid back, a staircase leading downward. "Hurry," Ilaria said, her voice raw. "We must rest." The bunker below. The space beneath the farmhouse, once part lab, part shelter. Metal walls insulated the cold, though the air was still and stale. The two elders collapsed onto makeshift chairs, their bodies flickering briefly between solid and shadow. Without words, they reached for Kayla and Jonas. Neither resisted. The feed-in was silent, not violent, just draining. Quick slashes, pressed hands, gasped breaths, eyes fluttering. A taking, but not a breaking. When they finished, both elders leaned back, exhausted, pale even by their standards. "It is not enough," Veyron muttered. "It will do," Ilaria whispered. "For now. We must sleep. You'll watch?" Jonas nodded. "Of course." They fell still. Shadows gathered. The bunker was silent. Elsewhere, Mira. Above the crypt, Mira stood alone. The wind had changed. She'd just finished her third round of scent masking. Her formula was stronger now. Ammonia, sulfur, copper salts, layered perfectly with repellent bases to confuse olfactory tracking. But something felt wrong. She didn't hear them. She felt them. A deep, vibrating thrum in the ground. The breath of the predator before it howled. They were near. She didn't run, not yet. Instead, she sprinted to the upper level of the chapel, to a place she'd marked earlier. A rusted vent shaft, buried under rubble. She pulled it free, slid inside, and sprayed the opening behind her with a burst of her mixture, sealing it with salt and powder. Then she ran, through forgotten passageways, out broken side walls, into the forest behind the ruins. The chase. They followed. 4 lichens, massive, ravenous, drawn to the scent of life. But something was wrong. They couldn't track her. Her trail looped, reversed, doubled back. She'd laid false trails, used ash and heat patches to confuse body warmth, diverted water from a broken pipe to simulate movement. She even left behind strips of her own clothing, saturated in layered compounds, tucked into a rusted pipe that echoed her heartbeat, using a scavenged speaker coil. The lichens roared in frustration, and Mira, gone. Already 3 streets away, calm, focused, thinking. She returned to the crypt just before sunrise, tired, but untouched. She walked back inside, sealed the door, and breathed, and for a moment, in the mirror of a shattered pane, she didn't see a girl anymore. She saw something more. The day passed in silence. The wind moaned through the cracks of the ruined chapel, carrying with it the cold breath of winter and the distant howl of the world that no longer belonged to humans. Mira rested lightly, never fully asleep. Her body ached, but her mind never stopped working, tinkering, adjusting, preparing, just in case. If the elders didn't return, she'd last the night, maybe longer. But in her heart, she knew they would. As the sun sank once more beneath the blood-coloured sky, the shadows stretched long across the chapel floor. And then they moved. Without sound, without warning, Ilaria appeared. Her presence was like the drop in temperature before a storm. She stepped through the fading light, her cloak trailing behind her like the midnight mist. "Are you ready, my dear?" she asked gently. Mira stood, already prepared, her scent-masking agents freshly layered, her small pack slung over one shoulder. "I'm ready." Ilaria glanced around at the workbench Mira had created. Jars, vials, handwritten notes, a setup that looked more like a lab than a survivor's den. Her brow lifted, intrigued. "How did you come up with all this?" she asked, stepping forward, gently picking up one of the bottles. Mira shrugged. I don't know. It just sort of came to me, like I'd done it before, or someone had shown me once." Ilaria smiled faintly. "You're something remarkable, Mira." Mira met her eyes but didn't respond. There was no pride in her expression, just purpose. Ilaria turned towards the shadowed exit. "We need to leave." "I'm ready," Mira said again, her voice calm. "Sure." But just before stepping into the dark, Ilaria paused. "Oh, by the way," she said casually, "you once mentioned your father. Said he was a scientist." Myra nodded. "Yes, a great one. Before the world fell." Ilaria turned, her expression unreadable. "What was his name?" Mira blinked. "Oh, you wouldn't know him," she said softly. "His name was Winter." Ilaria's smile faltered, just for a breath, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned back to the dark. "Come, child," she whispered. "The shadows wait." And together they vanished into them. End of part 3, to be continued.